I means business.
The most famous monster in the world was created from the nightmares of a teenaged girl. 19-year-old Mary Shelley was vacationing with her husband in a lakeside chateau in Switzerland in the summer of 1816. Amid lightning storms, their friend Lord Byron suggested everyone write ghost stories. Mary's story involved a medical student who sews a creature together from the bodies of cadavers and gives it artificial life by electrical and chemical means. When his creator rejects him, the monster vows to destroy everything Frankenstein loves, and eventually kills his creator as well. The Thomas Edison Studios in New Jersey produced the first movie version of Frankenstein in 1910. Only 12 minutes long, it featured a monster created in a bubbling stew pot of chemicals. In 1931, to follow their success of Dracula, Universal Studios bought the rights to a stage adaptation of the story. Dracula's Bela Lugosi was cast in the film, and experimental filmmaker Robert Florey directed a screen test with Lugosi made up to resemble the silent movie monster, the Golem. But Lugosi turned down the role because it had no dialogue. A new director, James Whale, wanted Leslie Howard to star as the monster maker, opposite Bette Davis as his fiancée. Whale saw Boris Karloff in the studio commissary and decided the 44-year-old ex-truck driver would be a perfect monster. Accepting this as a compliment, Karloff worked with makeup genius Jack Pierce. This photo shows an early conception with odd flesh horns on the forehead. Karloff himself suggested nose putty on the eyelids for a half-dead expression and removed his molars to make his cheeks look sunken.
When this dead hand moves, the monster created by a man they called Mad is turned loose to strike terror into the hearts of men. To shock women into uncontrolled hysteria. Elizabeth! To prey upon the innocence of children. This is the story you've heard about, talked about. The spine-tingling, blood-chilling story that stuns your emotions. Frankenstein.
Don't touch that!
Almost immediately, Universal planned a sequel, Return of Frankenstein, which would team Karloff with Bela Lugosi as an eccentric colleague of Dr. Frankenstein. That role instead went to actor Ernest Thesiger, an eccentric colleague of James Whale. The new script used elements of the Mary Shelley novel, such as the monster demanding a mate and learning to speak. Karloff objected, feeling that the role was more sympathetic as an inarticulate brute. But the director overruled him. James Whale saw the film as a gothic curiosity filled with grotesque black humor. Elsa Lanchester played a dual role as Mary Shelley in a prologue and as the monster's mate in a makeup patterned after Egyptian Queen Nefertiti. successful reissue of Frankenstein and Dracula in 1938 prompted Universal to go back into the monster business. The studio planned a Class A sequel, with Peter Lorre playing the son of Dr. Frankenstein. A test reel was filmed in Technicolor, with Karloff and Dwight Fry, who played the Hunchback in the first film. This footage still exists, though Universal seems to have mislaid it in a New Jersey film vault. Dwight Fry was replaced by Bela Lugosi, heavily disguised beneath a shaggy wig and beard as the sinister Igor. Ultimately, Basil Rathbone played the second-generation monster maker. Vast, expressionistic sets added to the aura of mystery. The plot, however, left Mary Shelley far behind.
A man, I should destroy him. But as a scientist, I shall do everything in my power to bring him back to conscious life. Benson, turn on the generator.
Produced on a vast scale, Son Frankenstein presents the most fearsome cast in the history of the screen. The Rathbone. In his heart, warm human emotions. In his mind, the monster mania. Karloff, rising from the past to spread new terror. Lugosi, sinister, mysterious, evil. Lionel Atwill, grim hatred in his blood.
By heaven, I think you're a worse fiend than your father. Where is this monster? Where is he? I'll stay by your side until you confess. And if you don't, I'll feed you to the villagers.
Despite good humor on his 52nd birthday, Karloff had reservations about the film and the change in costume. He vowed never to play the character again, and he held to that vow exactly 2 years when he umpired at a celebrity baseball game in 1941, with makeup man Jack Pierce close at hand. Universal carried on with Ghost of Frankenstein. Since Basil Rathbone was busy playing Sherlock Holmes, Sir Cedric Hardwicke stepped in as a second son of Frankenstein. The studio's new monster man was Lon Chaney, whose father had starred in silent films like The Hunchback of Notre Dame and The Phantom of the Opera.
There's a curse on our village. The curse of Frankenstein.
That your mother was the lightning.
The most dreaded creation of man, the monster of Frankenstein, stalks again. Here is drama completely strange, full of weird suspense. With this great cast, Sir Cedric Hardwicke, Lionel Atwill, Ralph Bellamy, Bela Lugosi, Evelyn Ankers, Lon Chaney, in the gripping tale of a monster the tomb cannot engulf, chains cannot hold.
You're going to give him life? Yes. Not for the purposes that you think, Igor. I'm giving him another brain.
That's your shower, husband? Yes, yes.
In the climax, Frankenstein realizes he's transplanted Igor's brain into the monster, which speaks in Bela Lugosi's voice. The next film was a sequel to both Ghost of Frankenstein and The Wolfman, scripted by Kurt Siodmak, author of Donovan's Brain. Now, with a wife and son to support, Bela Lugosi could not be so picky and accepted the part he'd rejected 12 years earlier, although stuntman Ed Parker doubled the 63-year-old actor in more strenuous scenes. Seeking release from lycanthropy, Larry Talbot discovers an ice cave beneath the ruins of Castle Frankenstein and thaws out the fresh frozen monster. Referring to the project as the Meat Man Wolf's Frankenstein, Siodmak wrote a scene in which Chaney explains that he changes into a werewolf during the full moon, to which the monster replies, "You're kidding." Unfortunately, this and all of Lugosi's dialogue was cut, as were references to the monster's blindness. Thus the monster shambles around like a half-wit, his eyes closed, his arms outstretched.
Understand. There's a curse upon me. I change into a wolf.
Listen to me. I saw my father become obsessed by his power. He died a horrible death.
There's no need for us all to storm after her. She'll come in if I ask her. Why should we treat her so fancy? She's a Frankenstein.
Studio executives figured if 2 monsters were good, then 5 should be better. Boris Karloff returned to the series as a mad doctor in House of Frankenstein. Assisted by psychopathic hunchback J. Carrol Naish, Karloff pulled a wooden stake from a skeleton and revived Dracula in the person of John Carradine. He thawed out the Wolfman, again played by Lon Chaney, and defrosted the undying monster for the second time. As Karloff anticipated in 1939, the character had become little more than a bit part.
I'm going to repay you for betraying me. I'm going to give that brain of yours a new home in the skull of the Frankenstein monster.
The jugular vein is severed, not cut, but torn apart as though by powerful teeth.
A werewolf. Last night I killed a man.
You didn't know what you were doing.
But I did. I wanted to kill.
I think they're after Dracula.
During filming, Karloff took some good-humored revenge on makeup man Jack Pierce and even coached cowboy actor Glenn Strange on the proper method of walking and growling. Short on logic and long on coincidence, nevertheless, House of Frankenstein was a success. The monster returned, very briefly, in House of Dracula in 1945, although scientist Onslow Stevens spent most of his time wrestling with the Wolfman or battling Count Dracula.
see before you a man who lived for centuries, kept alive by the blood of innocent people. When the full moon rises, I turn into a werewolf, with only one desire, to kill.
I tried to perform the miracle of science and failed. My blood is contaminated with the blood of Dracula.
The monster himself did not come alive until the last 5 minutes of the film, and then primarily with stock footage from Ghost of Frankenstein. The classic monsters united one last time in 1948. Lou Costello's antics made it hard for Glenn Strange to keep a straight face. Once, when Costello missed his mark, the monster's fist punched through a prop door and slugged the comic right in the face.
Count Dracula sleeps in this coffin, but rises every night at sunset. Chick is right. This is awful silly stuff.
Come on, take it all out.
Look out, Chick! Cover up! Cover up! Wait a minute!
The nation's top comics, Abbott and Costello. Petrified, but hilariously. Plus the dangerous and terrifying Wolfman, played by Lon Chaney. Plus that fiend out of a nightmare, the vampire Batman, Count Dracula, played by Bela Lugosi. Plus the most dreaded creature of them all, the Frankenstein monster, played by Glenn Strange. Plus a couple of luscious but designing females in the spookiest laugh fest on record.
Glenn Strange broke his ankle during filming, and his friend Lon Chaney briefly donned the monster outfit for the laboratory scenes. In 1953, Boris Karloff co-starred as the two-faced fiend in Abbott and Costello Meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Not surprisingly, an old friend made a guest appearance in a wax museum.
The town, in a house of horrors that would frighten even Frankenstein. Come on, Will! We can catch the monster! Give me a hand!
And Glenn Strange lumbered again in this rare TV sketch, broadcast on CBS in 1954. The masks and costumes from Abbott and Costello Meet Jekyll and Hyde can be seen in the background. Science fiction monsters like the creature from the Black Lagoon were the order of the day. But in Great Britain, Hammer Films returned Frankenstein to life, not with electricity, but with large doses of Mary Shelley's original story, on-screen gore, and vibrant color.
In Switzerland lived a man whose strange experiments with the dead have since become a legend that is still told with horror the world over.
We've only just started, just opened the door. But now's the time to go through that door and find what lies beyond it. But don't you see, Paul? We've discovered the source of life itself, and we've used it to restore a creature that was dead.
This is Frankenstein, who revolted against nature, who experimented with the devil and was forever cursed. His unwilling collaborator was Paul Kremp.
I can't prove you murdered, but I can stop you using his brain.
Why, he has no further use for it?
Don't be a fool! Be careful! You damage it!
Only 2 women ever entered this house of evil.
Elizabeth, come back!
Elizabeth, the lovely cousin who had promised to marry him, and Justine the maid, who kept passionate and secret rendezvous with her master.
Won't you understand you're in real danger? What Victor is doing is dangerous to everyone in the house. Now, you cannot possibly conceive what dreadful thing he's planning to do.
What are you trying to tell me, Paul? That Victor's wicked? Insane?
Wicked, insane, evil. Call Frankenstein what you will. A demon had made a man-made monster, and now the monster was the master.
Paul, what are you going to do? For your sake and to protect Elizabeth, I've so far kept silent. But now I shall go to the authorities and have them destroy that creature. And see that you pay for these atrocities.
The film looked lavish, although Hammer's Bray Studios was actually just an old manor house with very little room to relax. Forbidden to use the familiar Jack Pierce design, Philip Leakey created a patchwork of scars that looked like something from a traffic accident. Under that mass of putty and rubber, Christopher Lee found that eating anything but soup was impossible. The film was top-grossing in more ways than one. Director Terence Fisher provided close-ups of severed hands and dangling eyeballs. Curse of Frankenstein cost only $70,000 to make, but made $8 million worldwide. That prompted American International Pictures in Hollywood to produce I Was a Teenage Frankenstein. Ostensibly a follow-up to I Was a Teenage Werewolf, Gary Conway's monster face bore a cyclopean similarity to Christopher Lee. Although this Professor Frankenstein was supposed to be from England, Whit Bissell played the role with his natural Iowa accent. And crates in his lab were stenciled with the address 17 Wardour Street, West 1, London, the address of Hammer Films.
I want him to know and feel pain. What I create, I must control. Go on, activate this body.
Whit Bissell, demonic as Professor Frankenstein, who creates out of human parts the most terrifying creature to walk the earth today.
I should destroy you as dangerous evidence.
Gary Conway returned in How to Make a Monster in 1958, playing a young actor playing teenage Frankenstein. This murder mystery of a mad makeup man was set behind the scenes of a film called Werewolf Meets Frankenstein. Why does that title sound familiar?
To know the master makeup artist's magic.
How to Make a Monster.
Broadway stellar performer Robert H. Harris brings to this theater the most terrifying of men, a man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
I'll use the very monsters they mock to bring them to an end. This maniacal strength will linger in your arms and hands. And with it, you'll destroy your real enemies. Exactly as I instruct you.
Monster maker of make-believe land sells his talents to the devil.
I have a great honor to bestow upon you. I intend to add you two to my collection.
You want real heads on your wall?
As real as I can get them.
See the Master Monster Maker's Chamber of Horrors in color.
These cheap AIP teen monster films look like Cecil B. DeMille productions compared to the incredible Frankenstein's Daughter. Sandra Knight played the victim of weird drug experiments by Frankenstein's great-great-grandson, Oliver. But no one told makeup man Harry Thomas that the second monster was supposed to be female as well. So Thomas added lipstick to the stuntman's face. Voila! Instant female monster.
An evil reborn from the grave of Frankenstein, bringing a macabre nightmare to a teenage world of rock and roll emotions. For the first time, a female descendant of the infamous Frankenstein. Deadlier, more terrifying than ever before. He needed her kiss to satisfy his desire, but he wanted her soul for the fiendish creation that was to rule the earth in terror.
I'm sure of one thing. You better hurry before the brain cells are damaged completely.
Frankenstein's daughter.
Now everything was ready. Who would be his first victim? Who will feel the cold sting of death?
Kill him! Call her off. Don't make me shoot. Go ahead and shoot. You can't even feel it. Kill him! Back! Get back! Kill him!
For the most suspenseful and gripping moments you have ever spent, see this masterpiece of Scream a Second Terror.
Hammer's sequel picked up precisely where their first film left off, with Baron Frankenstein on his way to the guillotine.
In the year 1860, I, Baron Frankenstein, was sentenced to death on the guillotine. Why? Why had the world condemned me? Because I was the first man to create another living being. The first unnatural man. But because his brain was affected, because he could not control his animal instincts, he was hunted down and brutally murdered. But I have escaped the guillotine, and I shall avenge the death of my creation. Nobody. He isn't born yet.
You will witness scenes never before seen on a motion picture screen. You will see Frankenstein take the eyes of one man, the brain of another. You will see lifeless hands begin to move. You will see a man turn into the world's most terrifying monster.
Anesthetic! Switch off!
Boris Karloff played yet another descendant in the 1958 thriller Frankenstein 1970, originally titled Frankenstein 1960.
The one, the only, king of monsters, brings you the demon of the atomic age. Boris Karloff as Frankenstein 1970. Carrying on the hideous experiments of his infamous ancestor.
In this stone sarcophagus, deep in the bowels of the earth, he buried his creature, his creation.
Frankenstein, 1970. In the hell pit of his centuries-old castle, he perverts the terrifying wonders of nuclear science.
Get you some eyes.
To unleash a horror beyond all imagination.
What kind of dealings do you have with the director of the morgue? Are you interested in corpses?
Even the cyclotron, concealed in his subterranean vaults, cannot complete his foul creation, for which he must have throbbing vital organs transplanted from living beings.
Two people are missing, and I want to know why they haven't come back.
Mr. Rowe, I imagine, would have us suspect foul play.
Boris Karloff as Frankenstein, 1970.
The final twist of the story reveals that Karloff has given a new face to his new monster, his own face. Karloff's last Frankenstein appearance was on an episode of the series Route 66, playing himself in the familiar makeup. Lon Chaney and Peter Lorre co-starred.
That proves it. The old ghosts are the best after all. And the power of all three of us in one picture. Why, it's almost too ghastly to contemplate.
Since Hammer produced their next sequel for Universal, they were permitted to use a version of the classic monster image. These sketches show Roy Ashton's concept for the creature. Unfortunately, the plot seemed like it was sewn together from the corpses of old Universal scripts. At least Peter Cushing was back in the lab, which looked spectacular, thanks to art director Bernard Robinson.
You are interrupting my work.
Your work. The work of the devil.
Hans, please, Father. You can't. No!
The evil of Frankenstein. The evil of a man who created a monster by crude surgery and harnessed the tempestuous forces of nature to give it life. The evil of Frankenstein unleashed a monster that terrorized a whole community. Peter Cushing as the Baron, and Peter Woodthorpe as the ruthless Professor Zoltan, who fought the Baron for control of the monster. Oh, he'll understand you, all right. He just won't obey you. That's all. Duncan Lamont as the Chief of Police. Katie Wilde and Sanderels as two young people caught up in the evil of Frankenstein.
Go back and kill him.
Japan's Toho Studios, best known for Godzilla, did an unintentionally funny twist on the legend in 1965.
In the ocean's unfathomable depths, a gigantic, man-like creature appears. Fiery depths of the earth comes a prehistoric mastodon of destruction. Never before has the screen known such heart-stopping terror. Starring Nick Adams.
Well, I feel he's very important from a scientific point of view. I'd have to cut off a leg or an arm.
Doctors, I won't let you conduct this test.
Frankenstein, with the strength of 1,000 men. And every man's need for affection that makes him a willing captive.
The chain hurt you.
The new scoop of the century. The horrifying touch of a severed hand with a life of its own. The terrifying force of a monster that dwarfs man's tallest structures.
Originally called Mars Attacks Puerto Rico, this no-budget extravaganza told of an android astronaut short-circuited into monsterhood.
Frankenstein meets the Space Monster.
All recorders too fast.
This is it. For the first time on the screen, America's missile might mobilized against annihilating invaders from outer space.
We have come here to this planet for one purpose only, to acquire breeding stock to repopulate our planet.
See the kidnapping of the Earth Maidens for the love-starved slaves of the sterile planet.
Very good. We have done well, Nadia.
I am pleased, Princess. You are satisfied.
I will be satisfied when we have enough more like her to commence phase 3.
A United States astro-robot become a creature of death. See, Frankenstein meets the Space Monster.
It was gunslingers versus ghouls in Jesse James Meets Frankenstein's Daughter. Actually, Frankenstein's granddaughter. She created her monster by strapping a motorcycle helmet onto the head of a bald weightlifter. At least she had the good taste to nickname her monster Igor.
Your strength, Jesse James. You will need it.
Your bullets can't hurt me.
Frankenstein created woman, Playboy playmate Susan Denberg didn't look a bit horrific. But looks can be deceiving. The Baron had broadened his scope of operations. Now he was transplanting souls.
The Masters of Horror present the masterpieces of horror. The ultimate in evil and desire. Frankenstein. Monster and Madness. Frankenstein created woman.
Who am I?
A beautiful woman with the soul of the devil.
Frankenstein created woman.
Who am I? Who am I?
You see, a shield of indestructible matter. What is it for? What is it for? To give life after death, my friend, that's what it's for. Life after death.
Peter Cushing as Baron Frankenstein, who crosses swords with Satan in his fight for immortality.
He lives. See, hence he's alive.
Susan Denberg as Christina, the deformed creature transformed by Frankenstein to a living beauty. Within her, a dead man's revengeful urge to kill.
Kill him. Kill him, Christina.
Foley Walters, the doctor who helps Frankenstein to violate the laws of nature.
Christina, my dear, that man possesses such power, such knowledge, that sometimes I don't even understand him myself.
The boy Hans is the tool of the Frankenstein experiment. These boys are the causeways.
Hans. Come back.
He's come back from the grave. Somebody's brought him back.
Baron Frankenstein had become progressively kinder and more heroic through the Hammer series, but he returned without morals or conscience in the aptly named Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed.
Frankenstein, scientist, surgeon, madman, murderer, the most evil genius of all time.
I can transplant his brain. If I don't, it'll die through lack of oxygen.
But that would mean you'd have to remove someone else's brain to do it.
Of course, Carl. How else?
Peter Cushing is Baron Frankenstein. While he lives, no one is safe. Veronica Carlson is Anna. Beautiful, desirable, trapped in Frankenstein's nightmare world.
What have you done to him?
What have you done to him?
Let me go! Oh, help me! In the name of God, somebody help me!
There is no one in the world who can help you except me.
You must leave this house after what I've done tonight. You must be completely trapped.
I won't go without you, Carl. The police! They're searching all the houses.
Search the length and breadth of Europe. Hunt him. Track him down.
You must choose between the flames and the police.
No matter what the risk, Frankenstein must be destroyed.
Jimmy Sangster had written Hammer's first two Frankenstein thrillers. In 1970, he wrote and directed a semi-satire on them for Hammer called Horror of Frankenstein. Peter Cushing relinquished his role to young Ralph Bates temporarily, and although his makeup wouldn't scare a child, David Prowse was exactly the right size, at 6 feet 7 inches tall. This was actually his second Frankenstein portrayal. In the James Bond comedy Casino Royale, for absolutely no reason at all, the Frankenstein monster stomps through Smersh headquarters. Prowse later appeared in Star Wars as the black-hearted Darth Vader.
Prepare yourself for a new Frankenstein. Searing the screen with excitement. A young Frankenstein, experimenting with the forbidden secret of life itself, molding his most terrifying creation. Frankenstein is back. To raise the dead, to terrorize the living. The masters of suspense offer you a shocking bargain. Your ticket entitles you to be frightened out of your wits at no extra charge.
In Italy, the distaff side of the family again reared its beautiful head in Lady Frankenstein. Sarah Bay played yet another Frankenstein's daughter, determined to show Dad a thing or two.
What evil science was practiced in this laboratory of nightmares? Who is this irresistible creature who has an insatiable love for the dead? What dread terror stalked the townspeople? The legend of Frankenstein once again brings terror and nightmare to the screen.
Stand!
Joseph Cotton is Baron Frankenstein, the scientist who dared to create a monster. Meet Lady Frankenstein. She's beautiful, she's evil, and she'll do anything for love.
Think of it. Think of me. Think of possessing me. Would you like to have my body bend to you? Would you like to make love to me?
Sarah Bay is Lady Frankenstein, a surgeon's mind and a body filled with bizarre cravings that no human man can satisfy. She creates a new, more terrifying monster.
I am my father's daughter.
You are referring to animal transplants.
Human.
Only the monster she creates can satisfy her strange desires. No man can escape her web of terror.
After Blackula and Dr. Black and Mr. Hyde came Black Frankenstein, also known as Blackenstein. Sadly, this tradition ended before someone produced the Blummy. Flesh for Frankenstein, an Andy Warhol production, jammed 3D organs and entrails into the audience's eyes. On a more refined note, Universal produced a big-scale TV version with an all-star cast in 1973. In a Dorian Gray twist, the creation, played by Michael Sarrazin, first appeared as a perfect specimen, but then degenerated, body and soul, until he looked a lot like Boris Karloff. In 1974, Dave Prowse lumbered again as the Baron's newest creation. Peter Cushing returned to his proper place in Hammer horror as chief of an asylum in Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell.
You have been found guilty of one of the vilest of crimes.
I am a doctor, you know.
I have decided to extend my leniency to its limits by only sentencing you to be committed to the state asylum for the criminally insane for a period of 5 years.
Behind these walls, cut off from a world of reality outside, confined to a world of madness and brutality within, Frankenstein lives.
I knew you couldn't give up your work completely. And you haven't.
Frankenstein returns as dedicated as ever to one unholy purpose, to build a living being.
I succeeded this time. And every sacrifice will have been worthwhile.
But what monstrous creature will emerge here when it can only be created from the bodies of the criminally insane?
There's a monster at last!
Only Frankenstein, only his incredible mind could create such uncontrollable terror.
To Baron Frankenstein, creator of man.
Creator of blasphemy from the bodies of psychopaths. A living thing assembled with the brain of an insane genius. A supreme madness distilled into the body of this monster from hell.
If everything could be reborn, unblemished. If a new version of his true self could be created, huh? In the normal way, by mating. But who with? Sarah.
That same year, Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks lovingly recreated the look of the old Universal classics. No cliché was left untwisted. The makeup on Peter Boyle even featured a zipper instead of old-fashioned bolts.
It's coming from the deep, dark recesses of the mind of Mel Brooks. I love her. Young Frankenstein.
Sky means business.
Young Frankenstein.
Oh dear, nothing left. What shall we throw in now?
Starring Gene Wilder as Dr. Frankenstein.
That's Frankenstein.
But what about your grandfather's work, sir? My grandfather's work was doo-doo!
Peter Boyle as the monster. Marty Feldman as Igor.
My grandfather used to work for your grandfather.
I'm sure we'll get along splendidly.
Oh, sorry.
Loris Leachman as Frau Blucher.
You played that music in the middle of the night? Yes! To get us into the laboratory.
Yes!
And it was you who left my grandfather's book out for me to find.
Yes!
So that I would...
Yes!
Then you and Victor were...
Say it. He was my friend!
as Inga.
Would you like to have a roll in the hay? Roll in the hay.
Kenneth Mars as the inspector. And Madeline Carr as Elizabeth.
Where am I? Calm down. What are you going to do to me? I'm not afraid of you. Listen, I have to be back by 11:30. I'm expecting a very important call.
Kill the monster! Storm their castle!
See Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein. Yes, I think we could all use a good laugh. But don't see it alone. Don't miss Young Frankenstein, personally directed by Mel Blazing Saddles Brooks, in black and white. No offense.
The Mel Brooks spoof put a damper on Frankenstein for a while, just as Abbott and Costello had done in 1948. But recently, the tide has turned. In The Bride, Sting created both an ungainly monster and a beautiful mate, played by Jennifer Beals. Roger Corman directed Frankenstein Unbound, with Raul Julia and John Hurt. Frank Henenlotter, creator of Basket Case, twisted the legend to make Frankenhooker. And what would Mary Shelley have thought of Frankenstein's great-aunt Tilly? When Freddy Krueger is a forgotten nightmare, when the bloody blades of Jason and Leatherface finally go dull, someone, somewhere, will experiment again. As we've seen, it's a very big family. One way or the other, Frankenstein will live forever.